Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next Zoom chat series. I'm here with my friend Sean Sprague here. Um, just a little over a year after we last came and talked about our journey from N95 to PAPR. It's been an eventful year, and we're happy to see everybody today and sort of talk about where our investigations and adventures have taken us since we were last with you guys on this topic about a year ago. Now, we will take questions at the end. So as they occur to you, if you want to type them into the chat, at the end, then I'll go through and read the questions, and either Sean or I will probably take turns fielding the questions that you guys have. But Sean's going to go first and give us a little overview again of PAPR technology, and then talk a little bit about where he's come to in this journey, and then I'll come after and do some use cases for everybody as well. So, Sean, thanks for being with us again.
Thanks a lot, Kara. Great to be here. Might take a second for me to get my setup here on my iPhone. Give me a second.
Sure, no worries. Still a few more people in as we talk. It is really interesting. If you guys have a chance to go back and watch that first video that we did, I sort of chuckle now at some of the questions or things we have. I know Sean and I had a lot of sort of extensive conversations about, oh, can we wear this in a museum? Will we be safe? How exactly does this work? And so it's really interesting to me that we have sort of all of our musings documented, and now we can come back again together and talk about where we've landed.
All right, can you all see that?
We can see it.
Okay, great. I'll start. Thank you. All right, well, hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today and to share some information on PAPRs and what they offer relative to other high-quality respirators. First, let's take a moment to establish how we can evaluate all respirators for their effectiveness, which is via two basic metrics: protection via the filter or filtration material itself, and protection via the construction, fit, or design of the device itself. The filtration layer is, of course, important because it filters out particulate matter, and the construction, fit, and design of the device itself is also important in its role of stopping unfiltered air from leaking into the breathing area from outside. These two metrics are measured separately, and it is important to use both to evaluate any respirator. The filters are defined by terms such as N95 or P100 that indicate a rating of filtration efficiency, as in what percentage of particles that meet the filter will be stopped by that filter. And the device itself is rated by something called an assigned protection factor, or APF, that describes how well a device, irrespective of the filter, protects the wearer, as in how well it keeps out air that did not come into the respirator via first coming in through the filter. So let's first use this approach to evaluate the popular 3M or N95. First, the filtration efficiency is indicated by the name of the respirator itself, as N95 indicates that it is, quote, NIOSH approved for at least 95% filtration efficiency against certain non-oil-based particles and aerosols. As a quick FYI, NIOSH is the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health and has an approved process for testing and rating respirators. In addition to the filter rating of the filter material used in the device, there's also, as I mentioned, the device APF, which is defined by OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, as, quote, assigned protection factor. APF means the workplace level of respiratory protection that a respirator or class of respirators is expected to provide to employees when the employer implements a continuing effective respiratory protection program. The APF for an N95 respirator such as the 3M Aura or 3M 8210 shown in the first row in this panel is 10. And for a half-base elastomeric such as my 3M 6500 shown in the second row here, it also has an APF of 10. So given that the elastomeric and the N95 have the same APF rating, what is it that allows the elastomeric to provide a higher level of protection? In this case, it has to do with the filter. The filter in the 3M elastomeric that I use is a P100, which, quote, filters at least 99.97% of airborne particles, end quote. This is functionally equivalent to the filtration efficiency of a home HEPA filter. This is a substantially higher degree of filtration than the N95, which offers 95% filtration efficiency. Some basic math will help make it clear just how much more efficient P100 is in this regard. First, if a respirator has 95% filtration efficiency, this means that it may let up to 5% of particles through the filter. In contrast, if a respirator has 99.97% efficiency, this means that it may let up to 0.03% of particles through the filter. Now, using a hypothetical example to make this tangible, suppose that 10,000 particles come into contact with an N95 filter, such as with the 3M ARA shown here. This means that up to 500 particles, which is 5% of that 10,000, may enter one's airways through the filter. In contrast, suppose that 10,000 particles come into contact with the P100 filter, such as with the 3M 6503QL filter shown here. In this case, just 3 particles may enter through the filter. So the N95 filter may allow up to 167 times the number of particles to the filter as compared to the P100 filter. Now we may ask, does this mean that the N95 respirator is 167 times less effective than P100? I would say that it likely depends on how you're looking at it. Yes, it is true that the N95 may let through up to 167 times the number of particles as the P100. However, we must also acknowledge that both masks completely stopped that first 95% of the particles, which in this example is 9,500 particles. That is really powerful stopping power on the part of both respirators, and both great results. So if stopping 95% of particles is a good enough standard for you, then both masks would be equally fine for you. However, if you're like me and you're interested in stopping all possible particles from entering your airways, then the P100 is substantially better because it reduces that remaining 5% of particles down to a minuscule 0.03%. Of course, this comparison assumes that one is getting a good seal with both masks. I should mention that fit testing is recommended for all face sealing respirators, and I would note that the 3M 6500 series that I mentioned offers a seal check capability, which is also useful. One note about elastomerics I should add, with half-face elastomerics as well as with N95s, these respirators only provide protection for one's mouth and nose, but do not protect one's eyes. So eye protection can be added for more complete protection. I use Honeywell UVEX S1650DF safety glasses for that, which I find to be a good choice, offering good protection because it has a gasket around the edge that creates a near seal, though not a perfect seal. And it seemed to fit well when worn with my 3M 6503QL elastomeric. And I can wear my glasses over top of them. I found the near seal to be a good compromise in most situations, as this reduces fogging, which occurred when I tried using fully sealed swim goggles. I did use the swim goggles for riskier indoor situations, such as doctor's appointments or a vaccine update, where I really wanted to guarantee a seal, but those did often fog up and cloud my vision. So for everyday use, I stuck with the UVEX safety glasses. Now, I would like to mention here that there is another elastomeric that offers nose, mouth, and eye protection, and that I consider to be a great value in terms of protection offered for the price. This is because for between $100 and $200, one can have a P100 elastomeric respirator that has nose, mouth, as well as eye protection, and has an OSHA APF of 50, which is 5 times greater than the APF of both the N95 and half-face elastomeric. This means that this device itself, irrespective of filtration, is 5 times as protective as these others. And when you combine this respirator with a P100 filter, it offers superior protection. Now, at some point while I was researching all of these various respirators, I came to learn about powered air purifying respirators, known as PAPRs. These devices work much differently than all the other respirators that I mentioned, in that with PAPRs, with loose-fitting hoods such as the one I eventually got, they do not rely on creating a seal on the surface of the face at the edge of the respirator. Instead, the device uses a constant stream of filtered air that is pushed into the hood via a motorized fan. And this outward pressure created in the hood both keeps the hood filled with filtered air and also stops unfiltered air from entering the hood around the elastic edges of the hood. The hood also allows the carbon dioxide that one breathes out to gradually escape through the elastic edge as well, as the outward pressure from the motorized fan pushes all the air in the hood gradually outward. Yeah, there are some benefits to the PAPR relative to the other respirators I've mentioned so far. Most significantly, PAPRs can have APFs that are orders of magnitude higher than those other respirators. OSHA's classification of APFs for these respirators designates a standard assumed APF of 25 for them, unless the manufacturer can demonstrate a higher value through their own testing. I contacted the manufacturer of my PAPR, which is Draeger, and asked them what the APF is for my device. And they said that their tested APF of the Explore 8000 and the standard short hood that I used was 1,544. This APF is 154 times higher than the N95s and elastomerics that we've discussed thus far, and speaks to the PAPR's superior ability to keep out unfiltered particles from one's airways. As noted here in this paragraph from the CDC, PAPRs provide increased protection over and above FFRs, which is short for filtering face piece respirators, such as N95s, and half-face reusable elastomerics. Also, please note that the filter is the same P100 type that as used with elastomerics we just looked at, and the difference in effectiveness with the PAPR comes from its higher APF. Also, the CDC notes that no fit test is required with PAPRs. In our two-level respirator analysis we've done thus far of looking at both filtration levels and APFs, we see that the difference between PAPRs and the other respirators comes from its combination of P100 filtration and higher APF rating. The PAPR is superior to N95s in both filtration material and APF, and is superior to the half-face elastomeric in its APF. Now I will mention the reasons why in March 2022, I decided to upgrade from a half-face P100 elastomeric and goggles combination to a PAPR. The first and main reason is that, similar to my upgrade to the elastomeric when the Delta variant emerged, the fact that the virus had then made another jump in transmissibility with Omicron led me to want to upgrade again. Though Omicron was often portrayed in the media as, quote, mild or milder variant, this, of course, was not accurate, especially as this variant infected such a multitude of people in December 2021 and January 2022, and as this variant could still cause major damage to organs throughout the body and cause long COVID. The virus had evolved at that point to become one of the most highly transmissible airborne viruses encountered in modern history. And given that vaccines continued to not be able to stop transmission and infection, and given that the public had largely stopped taking precautions as they had falsely been told that they were protected once they had gotten vaccinated, and that the pandemic was then a, quote, pandemic of the unvaccinated, end quote, it was up to me to shore up my own defense in response to this evolution. Also, of course, post-Omicron, there has been less and less good data available to us with which to make risk-based decisions, because testing migrated from the public and reported sphere more and more to the private and unreported sphere. And notwithstanding some wastewater testing data, we have more and more been, quote, flying blind in this pandemic without as much clear location-based information available as there was before. with which to make day-to-day decisions based upon. This erosion of available data also led me to want to increase my protection level in response. So that is the approach I took in March 2022. I wanted the best defense available against COVID that I could get, and that is what the PAPR provides. Also, I would note that SARS-CoV-2 is what is known as a BSL-3 lab pathogen, and I upgraded to using the equipment that scientists would use in a BSL-3 lab for protection. In a sense, one could reasonably say that the U.S. had become similar in character to a BSL-3 lab by the time of Omicron in 2022, and since that time, as it had become and has become saturated with SARS-CoV-2 in public and communal spaces. When looked at from a workplace protections perspective, it made sense and makes sense to me to use the same protective gear for this virus that workers would use in similar situations in their workplaces. Also, I would add that if any other BSL-3 pathogens, such as tuberculosis, started spreading rapidly and continuously throughout the country, I believe I would make the same choice in respiratory protection in that case as well. Although I got the PAPR in early 2022, it was not really until the beginning of 2023 when I began to accept that we were in a new normal of continuous substantial spread and transmission without the lulls that we had seen early in the pandemic, that I made the decision to leverage the superior protection of the PAPR to get more back to normal myself as much as possible, though with this added protection. This has been a wonderful addition to my life since over the past couple of years, as I've begun taking the metro again and getting out and about in the DC area, including visiting museums, retail stores, and takeout spots, and in general feeling freer to utilize more medical care, including, recently even going through many physical therapy sessions in my PAPR, which has actually worked out really well, and it is helping me get back on the path towards some of my fitness goals in that regard. Now, getting back to the PAPR itself, I will share why I chose this particular PAPR. I got the Draeger Explorer 8000 due to its high reviews that I read online, the fact that the hood appeared to have enough, and the fact that the hood appeared to have enough room in the front to contain my half-base elastomeric at that time, which it turns out it did, and because of its focus on durability and wearable design. I've also come to appreciate its modular design, making it very easy to switch out and upgrade individual components, as well as its focus on safe design with several sensor, indicator, and alarm features that minimize the potential for user error. It did cost me around $1,600, which is of course a lot. And I of course acknowledge my privilege in being able to afford this level of protection, though I felt and still feel it was worth it, because getting the best possible PPE may be the one area of protection in this pandemic that I have full control over. Unlike with vaccine effectiveness, government policies, or the behavior of others. And so I decided to go all in on respiratory protection. And I would note that I've used this PAPR for now 2.5 years at this point, and have used it nearly every day over the past 1.5 years, and it is still going strong. My use of the PAPR is still, I would add, part of a multifaceted approach of utilizing vaccines, avoiding risky situations, and testing. Though from my perspective, this superior quality PPE gear represents the strongest component among these that is available at this point in time in terms of pure stopping power against infection, which is my highest goal. In terms of the gear itself, I will note that this is professional grade gear and designed to protect workers in hazardous environments. Whenever I contact Draeger with questions about my PAPR, as I have several times, they usually ask me what company I am with or what industry I am in, as it is generally professionals who use this gear. The fact that I am using what is being used by industrial or healthcare workers in hazardous environments gives me even more confidence in it, as this gear was designed with them in mind. Now, let me take a moment to go through the components of this PAPR. My current setup includes the PAPR motor, a high-capacity battery that lasts 8 hours, the belt and comfort pad that snaps into it, and the premium short hood and flexible hose that were 2 upgrades that I obtained. I would also note that I cut out and taped a transparent UV blocking film layer, from the same brand that I use on my windows at home. on top of the face shield, which both removes the need for me to wear sunscreen on my face while walking around outside and also protects the face shield from any dust or scuffing. I also added Velcro pads to the belt to affix the pull straps and keep them from dangling in front. And this year, I also purchased a second high-capacity battery so that I would be able to take long day trips or other trips without having to stop, remove, and recharge the battery, but instead could simply pop in the second battery when the first one ran out, thus allowing me 16 consecutive hours of usage on the go. Also, there are some other side benefits of the PAPR that I'll mention that aren't related to COVID prevention in particular. One is that it has improved my sociability and social interactions to a degree, in that when I interact with friends now, they can see my full face and expressions, whereas this was not the case with my N95s and elastomerics. Another benefit is that it does not require me to keep clean shaven or close to it, as the elastomeric and N95s do, nor focus on keeping a continuous face seal, which is, of course, difficult to achieve when moving around a lot throughout the day. Also, another big side benefit is that it provides climate crisis air protection in that it filters out air pollution, including wildfire smoke, which came in especially handy last year. Of course, the other respirators that I mentioned would do this as well, though I think it is cool that the PAPR is creating a near particulate-free air environment for me as I walk around the city. Also, I wanted to mention that this PAPR and the other high-grade respirators we have looked at, unlike other types of COVID protective measures, will protect against all future variants, as no matter what the mutations are on the spike protein of this virus, that is irrelevant with this and all high-quality respirators, which capture these particles based on the physical property of their size and being aerosolized, and not their biochemical characteristics. And if any new aerosolized pathogens that transmit from human to human emerge, PAPRs and other high-quality respirators will be similarly useful as well. And for perhaps a novel perspective on it, it has occurred to me that this device may represent a sort of personal infrastructure investment in clean air, similar to how some people may purchase reverse osmosis filters to filter their tap water. I sort of view it as a luxury item of the future in this regard, in that given the often high levels of particulate matter in the air and their well-known adverse impact on health, using high-quality respirators while away from home in combination with HEPA filters in-home gives one continuous access to virtually particulate-free air. It has also occurred to me, given the recent spate of state, local, and municipal bans against masks or face coverings, that PAPRs such as the one that I use could potentially be exempt, given that one's face is fully visible. I am not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice, and of course I don't know this for certain, but it would seem logical to me that it might be difficult to arrest or prosecute based on these laws, given that one's face is fully apparent and visible, as well as the fact that this is clearly a medical device. Also, in my experience, I wanted to mention that I have received less negative feedback or harassment in PAPRs than I have in N95s, which I'm guessing maybe because people may think that I have a serious medical issue or simply do not know what to make of the PAPR. N95s, unfortunately, have become politicized and polarizing, and have become a politicized and polarizing cultural object, whereas PAPRs are still mostly unknown by the general public and don't have the same cultural meaning. I also wonder if, based on my experience in public, the fact that people can see your whole face when you wear the PAPR may make them slightly less likely to comment negatively, as being able to see your whole face when interacting with you may make it slightly harder for them to ignore your shared humanity and lose that aspect of interpersonal connection. That's just something that occurred to me recently. At the same time, I should mention that I have been questioned by police twice in my PAPR. Once by a Secret Service officer while walking near the White House, and another time by a DC police officer in a grocery store. The fact that it is so unusual in appearance to law enforcement may lead them to inquire about it. Though I will also say that the most humorous encounters I've had in public over the past 2 years were when I was wearing the PAPR. And one of them was, in fact, during the dialogue with the Secret Service officer by the White House. And another was a guy who, leaning out of his car window, smiling at me, asked me, "Hey, my man, is there another virus on the way?" Assuming, I guess, that I might know something given what I was wearing. Um, in general, I would say that people seem more curious and inquisitive about the PAPR and less overtly judgmental or critical relative to other masks I've worn. While going to an outdoor concert this summer with my cousin to see Trey Anastasio of the jam band Fish, I asked him what people in this crowd might think of my PAPR, and he replied, "At this show, people might think it's a continuous bong." Also, recently, one guy on the metro asked to take my picture while I was wearing it, and another was curious to learn about it and ask some questions about it. So this is kind of the general vibe I've had with the PAPR, which is, in general, people are curious about it, they have questions about it, they've never seen it before, so it has that novelty to it. Of course, I'm in the DC area, which is politically more liberal than some other parts of the country, so I cannot say these experiences would translate elsewhere, but I thought I would share that. There are a couple of qualifiers I should mention about the PAPR. First, that it only provides one-way protection for the wearer. If you would like to achieve two-way protection, you can add an N95 or two-way elastomeric underneath the hood. Also, I noticed that the arms of my glasses can sometimes create a tiny outflow of air that goes into my ear, which can be distracting, though I can usually largely mitigate it by adjusting the position of my glasses and the hood. And my upgrade to the premium hood seemed to improve this aspect as well. Also, there is, of course, a slight whirring sound from the fan motor that does become more noticeable, especially in quiet rooms. But for the most part, I can communicate pretty well despite that issue. I would also note that there are other PAPRs that are available. The other PAPR I was seriously looking at and considering purchasing when I was looking at PAPRs is the 3M VersaFlow, which is a similar design style and is also NIOSH approved and had good reviews. I also recently learned that GVS, the maker of the popular Ellipse elastomeric mask respirator, also makes NIOSH approved PAPRs, including the T200 shown here. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the CleanSpace PAPRs, as representatives from that company have given a presentation to this group. These devices are different from other PAPRs in that they are non-hooded and they operate using non-continuous airflow. CleanSpace offers NIOSH-approved PAPRs, and I saw this user on Twitter report that they were able to use it during air travel, which is something that, to my knowledge, is not allowed for the hooded PAPRs. I will finish today by saying that, thank you for listening, and I hope that what I have shared today has been helpful. And I hope that you all find a high-quality respirator that works well for you as part of a multifaceted protection plan. Thanks a lot.
That's a lot of great information, Sean. I appreciate you breaking that down for us.
Sure.
I want to just build on what Sean was saying by sharing my family's journey from, basically with PAPR use. I'm not going to take you all the way back to N95s. I think Sean's covered that really well. I'm going to go through how we were introduced to PAPRs and how we chose and what brought us to PAPR use, and then some of our use scenarios. And then when I'm done, we'll both take some questions. I see that there are questions that have sort of popped up in the chat. That's fine. Keep putting your questions in there, and we'll be happy to go through them at the end of our presentation. I wanted to start out by saying that when I think about PAPRs and why I reach for my PAPR over my 3M Secure Click, which I use P100 cartridges in, the main difference for me and my family, we have a lot of confidence in our 3M Secure Click with P100 cartridges and our PAPRs. The main difference for me is it all comes down to seal. If you have an elastomeric or you have an N95 on, you've got to have a seal. If you don't have a seal, maybe you're not fit tested, or like Sean said, you're moving around a lot and you break that seal, then you lose protection. Whereas with a PAPR, you don't have to have a seal. And I can't emphasize that enough. And it's not something that I understood when I started looking into PAPRs or using PAPRs, because I was so oriented to masks and sealing and fit that, I this was something, again, novel and new to me as I explored. And so I just want to put that out there. And as you see me walk through some of the things that we've done, I think you'll understand why that makes a big difference and where you might choose to use a PAPR versus, another more traditional respirator or even an elastomeric. So I'm going to share my screen here. And let me see if I can get my slides here started. My Zoom bars out of the way. All right, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my little screen? Thank you. Great. So where can you go in a PAPR? And spoiler alert, pretty much go anywhere. And that's one of the main things that made the PAPR so attractive to my family and why we really worked at becoming adept users, was because it was a little bit later, I think, for me than maybe for Sean. But I remember really distinctly reading the article. It's posted in our groups under, there's posts that say, when will the pandemic end? And I read this article about chaos theory and, iterating patterns, and it basically said that mathematically COVID would not end without really serious societal level mitigations. And that was about August of 2022. And I could already see that the societal level mitigations were going away. And so that only left me with this, okay, we're going to be in these repeating iterative patterns of wave after wave after wave, which we now know are true. That's borne out. And so I had to shift from I'm in waiting for this to stop, to get back to normal, to what is going to be our new normal. And for those of you who don't know me or my family, my children are very immune dysregulated. They have immune deficiencies and immune overactivation. So whenever they encounter just about any kind of pathogen, viral or bacterial, their immune system attacks their brain. And one of my children is on chemo for that condition, and a couple of two of my other children are on immunosuppressants. And so COVID just was a no-go for us as a family, because strep had already triggered this attack for us. Coxsackie virus, mycoplasma pneumonia, anything any pathogens that my kids would come into contact with would cause this neurological inflammation and problem for them. And so with everything that we knew about COVID, we knew that for my family and my children, it would really probably, decompensate them. And we're still not 100% sure if they'll be able to reachieve their baselines after any infections. And so we had to stop and think, okay, if there's a pathogen out there now that we know that activates the immune system in really bad ways, and it like exacerbates immune deficiency and causes neurological inflammation, and this is our new normal, what do we do? So before we actually knew what PAPRs were, um, this is my oldest daughter and my youngest daughter, and this was December of 2021. And this is the original microclimate, the microclimate air. This is the version 1. And we had actually, done a little research, and it just sort of made sense that having some self-contained air would be good. And my daughter on the right is the one who gets the chemo infusions, and they're 8 hours long. And we had to she had to be like in pretty close contact with a nurse during that time, but she also, needed the ability to eat or drink. And so this device came up, and at the time I didn't really fully understand how it could be protective and how it worked. I remember taking the fabric, because the fabric does not make a seal. The protection of a PAPR is maintained from the pressure of the air blowing outwards. And so one person explained it to me. It would be like trying to have a minnow swim up Niagara Falls for a pathogen to come into your PAPR, because there's just massive amounts of pressure that are pushing out from you everywhere. And so the fabric doesn't have to seal or be airtight. It just has to allow escape of that pressure and the other things. And so I remember taking the fabric on this and blowing through it and sucking through it and being like, okay, this doesn't seal. How is this protective? And then reading the data about how it achieved, N95 filtration, and really trying to wrap my head around it as early as December of 2021. Now, it didn't really turn out to be very practical for the young one. It was too heavy and bulky for her. We took her to one medical appointment in it, and she wasn't able to last very long. We were trying to look at like outdoor forest schools for her at that moment, and it was obvious that it wasn't really going to be an option for her. But my older daughter did use it for her in infusions for a while. And then we were introduced to PAPRs. This is was a little bit after the microclimate, or maybe sort of concurrently. There's a really great dental practice in New Jersey, which was a couple of hours within a couple of hours driving distance to us, and they were PAPRs just as a general rule ever since COVID. That's my little one getting her dental work done. And so we were able to see and talk to them about their PAPRs and their layers of mitigation. Now, I will tell you that this same dental practice, even though they had adopted PAPRs and air filtration and UV and stuff really early on, they didn't really understand source control until after we had been there one time. They didn't have N95s under their PAPR the first time we went. And we didn't understand that they needed N95s under their PAPRs. But another family that we know went and actually ended up getting RSV, they think, from the dental office. And of course, they don't know if it was fomite or air or whatever, but that's when we went through the whole research and learned that you have to have source control if you want to protect the other people when you're in a PAPR. And the dental office, to their credit, the minute they learned that, they started wearing N95s under their PAPRs to protect their patients as well. So all of this to say that PAPRs were sort of dancing around us, and we were sort of playing with this idea early on before this epiphany of our new normal. But again, they're expensive and they were hard to understand, and we weren't really exactly sure where we're going. We were going with them, and then Target happened. So my little one was, less than 5 when COVID hit, and or right at 5, and she never remembered going into Target. And every time we would go back past Target, she would say, "Oh, I hear there's wonderful things in Target. I really want to go into Target. I've never seen Target," because we do all of our groceries by delivery or occasional trunk dump. And so it was January of 2022, after a couple of years of hearing her ask to please go into Target, that we came up upon this. This is an actual, it's supposed to be a gas mask. It's supposed to be for chemical warfare, to protect children in areas where there might be danger of chemical warfare. And we said, okay, I'll put on a P100 and I will take you into Target. And it's actually the last time I think we've been into Target even then, but we went into Target in this little PAPR, which is a gas mask for kids. Now, later we learned that the airflow in this gas mask for children, it's not really very adequate for them to sort of maintain normal respiration. We did notice that when she tried to wear it a couple times to like play with other kids or whatever, she would get pretty winded and she wouldn't last very long. It was fine just sort of walking through the store. And it turns out that the liters of air per minute that flow through this gas mask are sort of abysmal when you want to look at like normal respiration and PAPRs. And so no longer recommend this mask for kids unless it's sort of an emergency situation, because while it is probably protective against pathogens coming in, it doesn't really give enough airflow to exchange the CO2 and for them to have healthy respiration, at any level of exertion. Another thing we explored, my older daughter, she's a performing artist. Before the pandemic hit, she was set to go into university to a singer-songwriter music business program, and that's all she's really ever wanted to do. And she lost her ability to perform because she couldn't be on stage. She couldn't be in crowded situations where people were sharing air. So we were trying desperately, after we sort of had this epiphany in 2022, to figure out a way that she could actually play her shows indoors. She had her band was supportive of her, and they would play outdoor festivals and they would play in N95s, and that was okay. But she really wanted to be able to, do her craft and sing and play in indoor shows. So we got one of these big bubbles. And you may have seen in some music videos, there's some groups that have actually played in these bubbles. And you know what? I'm not really sure how they did it because we put her in the bubble and we put a CO2 monitor in there, and the levels in a very, very short period of time were absolutely outrageous. There was no way she was going to be able to stay in that bubble for hours and hours and sing because, and I'm not talking about, oh, it was 2,000 or 3,000. I'm talking about like 30,000, 50,000. Like it was like incredible levels of CO2 really, really quickly in this bubble. And so we had to quickly discard that as an option for her and her music as we were sort of walking through. And it was a little bit before this that I started, sort of coming around and looking into PAPRs. It was about February of 2023 when I had heard these murmurings and people on Twitter and some of the scientists talking about PAPRs and so I started trying to figure out the science behind them and started reading papers and trying to really understand airflow and all of the things that I didn't really understand as a layperson, not an aerosol engineer, not a physicist, not somebody who really understood even airflow or air quality. The pandemic has been a great learning experience for me to learn some of these things. And so I started looking into these for our family. And in about the same time in April 2023, we ended up connecting with Clean Space, and I was in the process of opening our second medical clinic, where we were going to have a hybrid clinic, and I was going to be working in person sometimes. So my work agreed to purchase a PAPR for me when I came into work in person because I told them I wouldn't come if I didn't have a PAPR. And so we settled on the Clean Space, and in April of 2023, I got the Clean Space, got it fitted, started trying to learn, about using the Clean Space. About the same time we were looking at the other bubble things. And then in May was when Sean and I had connected and had come together to give the other presentation N95 to PAPR. And Sean had already been using his Draeger for a while when I met up with him and basically bombarded him with questions about his PAPR and how it worked and what he thought. And then along with some other friends who also had used PAPRs for their work, and was able to start gaining an understanding of what a PAPR could do for us, how it could, expand our horizons, how protective it was, what we needed, and what were some of the use scenarios. So in June of 2023, we took our first venture out to the movies. Now, we rented the theater, so it was just us and the other coveting family that we went with. So we were alone in our own theater, and they actually let us in the back door, so we didn't even have to walk through the lobby. And we felt, I don't know, we felt very, I don't know, free and liberated to be able to go to a movie. This is the first movie that we had seen, since early 2020. And my kids here have a Clean Space on. She has an origami over her Clean Space. She has he has a surgical over his Clean Space. And then my little one has the P100 Secure Click on because we still hadn't figured out a PAPR for the little one. We didn't really know about using the VersaFlows yet. And so we went to the movies and came back, and we didn't catch COVID, and we saw a big screen, and we were all elated. We didn't eat anything, we didn't drink anything. We just watched the movie and went back out the back door. But it was a big step for us as a pretty, hardcore COVIDing family to be able to go in and see a movie on the big screen. Then we figured out that the VersaFlow Smalls would fit my little. And so we actually found the deal that's still on Amazon. The price fluctuates. You can get a VersaFlow, I think it's the TR300. You can get it somewhere around $500. Occasionally it dips to like 450, and sometimes it goes up to 550, but it made it a little bit more affordable for us to put on a credit card and grab a VersaFlow and let my little one actually experience a PAPR. And we eventually settled on this mesh backpack so she could actually wear her PAPR with her mesh backpack. And this picture here is the first time she was able to go outside, go out our front door, and actually meet the neighbors we had lived with for at least a year. There's a little girl who was her age, and she was dying to meet her. But you know, they weren't COVIDing, they weren't masking, they were just living their lives. And so, and my little girl is super affectionate. She like hugs people and gets all in their personal space. And so I wasn't even really comfortable with her going over there with a mask with another unmasked child who I knew she would be right there for. So this was another big step for us. I remember the first movie. I remember her being able to go play with the neighbor. And in time, I don't have the video for you. I should have found it, but my 9-year-old actually can do front handsprings in her VersaFlow on her back, no problem. So kids are pretty resilient and figure out different ways to do things. And she's been able to sort of flow and go. And I was actually so grateful that we had figured this PAPR out for her, because towards the end of the month where we figured that out, she ended up needing medical care in the ER, not by an injury or anything. She didn't do a back handspring or break her arm, but she ended up needing medical care. We were in the ER. I want to say maybe 6 hours, 7 hours. And when I determined she needed medical care, I was able to grab our PAPRs and go to the ER and not have to sit there and break my head about where we're going to get COVID from seeking medical care, because actually me, my older daughter, and her, we all went and we all had PAPRs that we could put on and be protected there in the ER and be there for her. And so the doctors were a little bit curious, but you know, once we explained immunocompromised, they were like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense," and we were able to get the medical care that she needed. Then going back to the question of, you know, how will my daughter perform indoors? We thought, okay, can we mic in a mic a VersaFlow and see if she can sing in it? I don't know if this is going to transmit, but let you see if you can hear the result. Nope, can't hear it. Okay. Well, let me just tell you that you can sing in a VersaFlow with a mic like she's wearing. She was able to, we were able to take the wireless mic and have it Bluetooth connect to her amp and get good quality sound from her voice. And so she decided to adopt a astronaut aesthetic at first, and then she was able to go into indoor venues in her PAPR and sing with her band. And you can see they adopted some little alien glasses and little antenna for her. And they did like a whole set of being out of this world where they could actually do gigs. And they did a lot of gigs for the university scene around Princeton in New Jersey, and that allowed her to get back on the stage again and made her really super happy. And of course, that made me happy because she was happy. So we were starting to, learn where we could or couldn't go with our PAPRs, and how to navigate the scene. She also opted for the backpack because she could jump and sing and perform. Same time, our second clinic opened, and I actually opted for the VersaFlow over the Clean Space in clinic, because the Clean Space for me, it's fine, but number one, I can't answer the phone in it, and I can answer the phone in the VersaFlow. And the VersaFlow, my ears are out, so I can take phone calls. Number two, the Clean Space actually dries my sinuses out, and I did find a remedy for that. I could use the AYR, the Ayer saline gel before I use the Clean Space, and it's okay. But the VersaFlow to me is super comfortable. It's super lightweight and easy. And so for me personally, I don't really care that I look like a crazy alien from outer space. I'm happy to wear it and be fine. My children, my two big children, they still prefer the Clean Spaces. It's part of their aesthetic. They think that it looks much cooler, and so they like to use our Clean Spaces. We have a Halo and a Pro. but I tend to use the VersaFlow, and this is me when our clinic opened in our VersaFlow. And then I thought, okay, so we've been in the ER and we haven't caught COVID. She's been on stage, and she did have her UV lights on stage, and we all also were using our nasal sprays and our Lumify eye drops, and you know, we're not eating or drinking, all of those things. But we're again taking those steps towards feeling safe and understanding scientifically how protected we are and what we can do. So I finally went to the bank. It had been, you know, again, 4 years since I'd actually been inside the bank, and I had to sign some papers, and I went into the bank in my VersaFlow and thought, okay, that's pretty cool. And then this was sort of another one of our moments, another one of our crucial moments. My daughter, who is a performing artist, her idol is Hayley Williams from Paramore. She's just dreamed of meeting Hayley Williams, and she actually is sort of a brand ambassador for some of Hayley's hair products with Good Die Young. And when they came to New York City, my daughter said, "Please, Mom, this is once in a lifetime. I really want to meet my mentor, and we have these PAPRs." And I had a conniption, and I was trying to decide, should she wear the VersaFlow? Could she wear the Clean Space? Was this safe enough? She was going inside this beauty salon place with a bunch of people, and I sort of had a little mini meltdown, and then decided, all right, you know, and I called up again some of my friends who had been using them industrially, and I asked a million questions, and we sent her off in her Clean Space. She is wearing stoggles there in her Clean Space, and she went to this meet and greet with Hayley Williams, had a great time, and was able to avoid infection. And we took a little collective sigh of relief and understood a little bit better about how protective these PAPRs are regardless. And the truth is, guys, people work with Ebola in these PAPRs. People work with the pathogens in the labs in these PAPRs. People work in healthcare around, you know, in the units where people are infected, and these PAPRs are protective. You are in basically a contained, you know, air system, and so the likelihood of you being infected in a PAPR is minuscule. So when I went to get my updated vaccine, I went into Costco, and we all went in our PAPRs. We started going to museums, started taking the little, started getting some friends together, had a little PAPR group that would come in and do. This is the Museum of Nature and Science. Went to the first conference that I had been to in years. Uh, took the two batteries, like Sean said. A VersaFlow battery lasts me about 12 hours almost. And this one, I was there from really early in the morning until, you know, fairly late at night. So I just swapped the batteries when one ran out. I put the other one in and had plenty of time at the conference. And then in November, my son needed a medical procedure, my middle child. And so we actually had to take a trip across the country to where he could get this medical care. And we were able to use our PAPRs in the facility. He was able to use the PAPR during his procedure. We were able to visit. These are our old neighbors. We used to live across the country in Colorado, and we went and we visited friends, and we all had our PAPRs on, and they sort of raised their eyebrow at us, but they knew we were a little bit crazy anyway. And so it allowed us to, you know, do all the things that we needed to do safely on our trip and avoid exposure. Then we took our next big leap, and we went to the ballet in December. It used to be our tradition to go to the Nutcracker every year. And when the pandemic hit, of course, we watched it on TV. And then last year we said, okay, we are going to use our PAPRs, and we're going to go to the ballet. And I was a little bit concerned that there might be too much noise, but there was not. The ambient noise of the theater was louder than the Clean Space or the VersaFlows. And you can see we had a whole row. Again, we had our little PAPR club here, and we had a whole row of people in PAPRs. We did choose the balcony, so there was nobody in front of us. We chose the front row of the balcony, and there weren't very many rows actually behind us because it was sort of a small theater. But we were able to go and watch the Nutcracker and meet the dancers afterwards, all in our PAPRs, and continue the tradition in our family that we weren't able to continue before. Then the following spring, there was a gala, a charity gala, And my daughter said, Mom, I want to go to this formal gala. And this was the first time where we did a lot of investigations, and she took a straw. And I had been doing this at work for a while, and we had been, looking around at basically the outflow and what kind of gap the outflow could overcome. And I've got a slide at the end that will show you how big of a gap the outflow can overcome. And so she could slip a straw under her PAPR and eat, and drink. And she actually also could create a little space in her PAPR and slide bites. She didn't slide very many bites, but she was able to slide some bites and to drink and to go to this charity gala, which was a formal event where there was dancing and a dinner there indoors in her PAPR. And then in April, came along my son and his one of his idols, a musician that he wanted to go listen to. And they were like, Mom, come on, you've done so much research, you understand PAPR outflow, and basically, we can be in a COVID ward in these PAPRs. Let us try doing shows. And so once again, my phone of friends probably get sick of me calling them up and saying, are you sure this PAPR, the physics and all of that? But by this time, we're honestly feeling pretty comfortable about our PAPR's protection. And so my kids went to their first show where they were in the audience in a very crowded venue in their clean spaces in April. And then basically I said, all right, my nerves can handle one a month. And so they went to a different one in May. And then in July, my son actually ended up performing. He's also a performing artist. And he actually performed in a P100 secure click because it's his aesthetic. But you can see here my daughter in the front row, and she's in her clean space at a crowded venue. And then in August, they went to a full festival, and you can see how many people are in this room. And I'm going to show you this little video here. Yeah, good thing you can't hear this one because the music's a little bit obnoxious, but I want you to see, do you see this guy right here that's in the center jumping around? I put a little red arrow over him here, but you can watch him sort of jump around in the crowd here. And that's my son there, basically in a mosh pit in his PAPR. And so each time we sort of took another one of these steps, we instituted a very strict testing routine afterwards. We would test them at 48 hours, at 72 hours, at day 5, and again at day 8, to make sure that we weren't missing any asymptomatic infections or something hadn't gone through, just because they were in a very crowded, high risk environment. So, and this was with the Plus Life, so PCR like quality testing. I think actually after the very first one that they did, I tested them 48, 72, day 5, day 7, day 8, and day 10. And then we sort of settled in on our 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days routine to make sure that we were not actually asymptomatic. Also ended up using the dental hack. The really great dentist that we do love and still occasionally go to in New Jersey is a couple of hours away from us and doesn't take our insurance. And so being able to go to a local dentist that does take insurance and is happy to allow the dental hack and our our far UV in the room, and does have air filters and a room with a door. But finally got up the courage to go ahead and do that for some dental work. I upgraded to the high durability hood, and I think that's helpful. The disposable white hoods last me 2 months, maybe 3 months. They last the kid maybe 1 month because she's harder on them. And so I usually get a case of 5 on eBay for about 60 or $70 depending, and then swap them out as they get dirty or worn. So I'm hoping that the hydroability hood, of course, is going to last longer. Haven't had it that long, but so far so good. I think it looks a little bit neater too. Just personally, I mean, as if the aesthetic is that different between one or the other. And then uh this is my youngest on the first day of her first day of school. Now she is still homeschooled, don't get me wrong. She's not going all day, but this is her homeschool enrichment program. And we were able to finally go ahead and send her off to do some classes with her peers, with her PAPR on, because we felt comfortable that with the protection of the PAPR that she would be okay. Now, how big of a hole can you cut in it? Here's one of the aerosol experimenting scientists on Twitter. And he's showing how he's cut a nice large hole in the front of his, and he has his port account here, and he's showing the particulate level outside, and then he's showing the particulate level in his mask, even with the hole. And that illustrates how protective these PAPRs are, how much that positive air current pushes all of the other air away from you in this kind of contained environment. He was actually able to eat a candy bar, and he had a 99% filtration efficiency, even with this huge gaping hole that he cut in the front of his mask. Some of our friends over in PAPR Party who have port accounts have done similar things, pulled their mask, 3 inches away from their chin, and watched what it does. And the positive pressure of the air pushing out just really makes it where things cannot come in. And then recently, I think I saw our friend Ort here on this chat, shared with us in our PAPR party a picture rock climbing at the rock climbing gym in the PAPR. So that was pretty awesome, and just underlined to me, where can you go in a PAPR? Well, you can rock climb in a PAPR. You can basically go to school in a PAPR. You can go to concerts in a PAPR. There's not much you can't do safely in the PAPR. Now, what would my caveats be for the PAPR? My caveats would be, number one, we always have a mask in our pocket, very readily accessible, because mechanical failure can happen, right? You can have, your battery can die, or you can, have some component, and you don't want to be without protection at all. So we always have nose spray, we always have eye drops, we always have a mask in our pocket, just in case. And actually, I was seeking medical care a few months ago. Just I was having some routine scans, and the seal on my secure click failed. And I actually, because I wasn't sure if I could wear my PAPR while I was in the scans, I had it with me though. But because I have that habit of having the mask in my pocket, when I realized my Secure Click seal failed, I was able to hold my breath, grab my mask, put my N95 on, and then, get into my PAPR pretty easily. So I would say you always want to have that extra layer of protection with you. The clean spaces do say you got N95 protection even without the blower. But I don't find it really easy to breathe in the clean space without a blower, honestly. It's sort of like big breaths kind of trying to pull that air through it. It's not something I would want to do for very long. And so I would just keep my V-Flex handy. I always have that in the pocket. So that's one caveat that I have. Another caveat that I have is, you have to have them charged. So there's been, I have a PAPR charging station at my house, and I'm really continually on, the kids to keep them plugged in when they're not in use, because you just don't know if you need emergency medical care or something, and then you turn around and your PAPR's dead, then you're sort of out of luck with how useful that can be to you. So, and we do have our 3M Secure Clicks as backup. And I do consider I like the Secure Click as an elastomeric because it has the button that you can check your seal. And so you can check your seal as often as you want, and you can really sort of be assured that that seal is there. And then it's also the the P100 protection. But again, I wouldn't break a seal in it. Like you can't stick a straw under it to drink. You can't try to eat in that. You can't, that seal is what is, giving you your protection, versus with a PAPR, you have some more flexibility with that. And so my daughter, who has infusions, can hydrate and eat or drink during infusions. And again, like I said, you actually can come a fair amount of distance off your face. So if you plan it, like you can, pop some sushi under your hood or something like that, and you can eat in situations where, it's not been possible for us to safely do that before. So that's sort of how we've come to where we are. And basically right now, if they're willing to wear a PAPR, they can go wherever my children can go wherever they want. And I sort of can go wherever I want, as long as I'm in a PAPR. So if I want to go visit a friend, I can visit a friend in a PAPR. If I want to, go into a store, I can go into a store with a PAPR. I'm sort of spoiled now to to deliver and trunk dump. I don't actually do that a whole lot, but I can. It's always nice to know that I have that option available to me. And so the PAPR just makes the world a whole lot bigger place. The world had pretty much, been condensed to our house. We were there at our house or on the screen, and having this protection. I mean, and then of course outdoors we would be hiking. We had our COVIDing friends, but the world just opened up to us once we were able to understand and embrace the PAPR technology. And just on that note, we do have COVIDing co-ops that we participate in. We do have some exposure guidelines or things that we talk about during those co-ops, and we don't count exposures in PAPRs because of the high level of having that contained air. So when we're talking through what we've done, having done stuff in the PAPR doesn't really count into the risk calculus for us anymore, because actually most of us all have PAPRs, and we understand that as long as it's an environment where we can keep our PAPR on, we can be relatively safe. Now, obviously, like if it's a dentist or something where we have to remove the PAPR, then that counts as an exposure for us. So with that, Sean, if you and I want to maybe take some turns on these questions, I am happy to talk a little bit more about the things that we know, and I'm sure Sean is too. Are you there, Sean? Great. Awesome. All right, curious how important, if you think that differences in APF are with NIOSH approved PAPRs. Sean, you want to go at that one?
That's a good question. How important for APFs in NIOSH group? I don't know specifically how the APF factors into whether something is NIOSH approved or not. So I don't know how that factors in, but I just know that a higher APF is better. Of course, you can get good protection with an APF rating of 10 on a respirator with N95s or half-face N95s for elastomerics. But, I prefer, like I said in the talk, going a good bit higher than that just for added protection. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that by the time you're getting to P100 filtration, your APF is probably a little bit gravy. Like Sean was saying, an APF of 10 on elastomeric is really pretty damn protective. So if you're going up to 1500, like I said, you're basically in a self-contained respirator system. So there would have to be some serious extenuating circumstances, or just really, really, really astronomically bad luck odds for you to be able to be infected by any of these PAPRs. The thing that I would say is, if it's not NIOSH approved, you do want to make sure that somebody with a port account or somebody with a meter has checked the airflow, because there are knockoffs out there that don't have sufficient airflow to be protective. So grabbing these brands like the Draeger, or grabbing like 3M, or or ones that people have tested, that's going to be really important. If you get dry mouth with air in addition to dehydrating medical conditions like hyperglycemia, how do you intervene? Mouth so irritated, hard to tolerate. Well, like I just said, you can, pop a straw under there and drink if you have dry mouth, or you could suck a candy if, the seal on a PAPR does not have to remain intact. Oh, Sean, I think you mentioned you used an elastomeric under the PAPR in the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, I did. At that time, I don't think I really fully understood just how protected the PAPRs were, and you actually helped fill me in on that. Thank you for that, Kara. And I didn't understand that. I didn't know about the APF ratings. I didn't even know what APFs were at that time. I just knew that PAPRs were the highest, quality that you could get in terms of effectiveness. And so I thought, well, in case anything goes wrong with the PAPR in a given moment, I'll have the elastomeric underneath, and I'm kind of used to that at that time. I'd used that throughout the Delta wave, and I thought, okay, well, I want to have that. I want to be able to have that underneath. So I looked at the the Draeger website, and it looked like the hood really curved quite a bit in front. So I thought, I bet I could fit the elastomeric in there, and sure enough, I could. And I actually wore that combo for a while, but eventually, thanks to your help, and added information, I stopped using it, and I just go with the PAPR alone now. Yeah, I've been doing that way for, I guess, at least a couple years now, and I do wear an N95 underneath the PAPR when I go to COVID cautious events. There are COVID cautious events in the area, and they say KN95 or N95 at least, required. So and they're indoors, so I'll just pop an N95 underneath of it, so to get that two-way protection.
You remember you and I had a conversation about whether or not we could go into the Smithsonian in a PAPR, and we weren't sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've sort of come a long way since we were trying to figure this out together.
Absolutely.
Could you post a link to the UV film that you use for the audience? Do you have you can email that to me, and I can put it in the and when we post it in the groups, I can put that, or if you have it, you can put it in the chat. The UV film that you use to cover your Draeger.
Yeah, I'll do that. It might be near the end of the talk. I've got the iPhone set up here, so it's difficult to manipulate it, but I'll definitely add that to the chat before we close.
Yeah, no, Christina has notes coming, so it can also be in Christina's transcript as well. All right, what is reaction from the members of the public? Sean and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, and I said my 9-year-old has become very proactive when she's out in her PAPR. If she notices that someone is staring at her, she looks them straight in the eye and she says, "Greetings, Earthlings. I come in peace." and usually they just die laughing. And then they're like, "Really?" And she's like, "Yes, I'm from Mars. How are you? Want to ride in my spaceship?" And then eventually she tells them that, she's immunocompromised and she's got a sister on chemo, and this is why she wears this. And she's pretty outgoing. And so if she's with me, I don't really have to worry about it because she's going to take care of it. And everyone's just going to sort of follow her around and listen to her because she's really outgoing. But I've only ever one time encountered somebody that was sort of semi-hostile to me in a PAPR. I was coming out of a doctor's appointment, actually, and some medical tech came racing across the parking lot and looked at me and said, "What are we doing here?" and, and actually I was sort of in my own little world, and I had, I wasn't expecting that, or I probably could have been like, quippy or whatever. I just looked at her and I said, "Protecting my kid on chemo?" She went, "Oh, sorry," and like turned around and ducked her tail and walked off. But anyway, that's the only time anyone's ever even really remotely been nasty to me. And it wasn't that nasty. It was just she was a little aggressive. Other than that, I've got, like Sean said, a lot of curiosity. What is that? Why are you wearing that? How does that work? Oh, wow, that's neat. I wonder where can I buy one of those? I've had several people actually who are wearing just regular masks come up to me and see me in the PAPR and be like, "What is that? And where can I get one?" So it's actually been pretty positive to me. And I see there's a lot of questions about your encounter with the police, Sean. What did they ask you? How did that resolve?
And both of them went pretty smoothly, and I think in both cases they were kind of just checking me out because I was wearing something that was so different. Especially the first one, walking on the street near the White House. The second one was in Whole Foods. I'll start with that one. I mean, there was some humor in both encounters as well. In addition to I think they were, doing their job and checking me out because I was wearing this, pretty substantial gear. I was in, that little area in limbo in the Whole Foods where you're not in the cashier, you're not in front of the cashier, and you're not like, you're kind of in the hallway that goes horizontally in the store, and you feel like you're kind of in the way. And Whole Foods usually has a rule where you stand behind that area, and like they have like areas where you can line up behind that, so you're not in the way of people going laterally across the store. But it was like I think it was like a Sunday morning or whatever. It was pretty empty in the store, so I thought I'm just going to stand here, whatever. But then I saw a cop in the corner of my eye or a security guard. I didn't know what he was at first, but I saw him make a beeline towards me. And I'm like, uh-oh, did I screw up here? I'm in trouble. But it became immediately clear he wasn't saying, okay, don't stand over there, don't stand here, stand there. He was saying he was interested in what I was wearing. Because what he said to me, he said, he looked me dead in the eye and he said, "What do you know that we don't know?" And it was kind of a funny thing to say, like, I kind of got the humor, but I didn't like start busting out laughing because this is still a cop, and I that's when I noticed, oh, he has a big badge, he's a DC police officer, and I am kind of a little hesitant, to just catch what I say, think about what I say before I speak. I'm a little on guard, but funnily enough, we got to talking a little bit. He just had more questions about it, and meanwhile, people are going by me, checking out their groceries, and I don't know if I'm being, what's going on here exactly, but he's just asking more questions. And the approach I take with the cops is just let them talk. Don't start start like giving a lot of information about it. Let them kind of go. And I started asking him questions. Oh yeah, so was it, just he seemed interested about it, and he was kind of sharing things of his ideas of his own that he come across like, oh yeah, I actually have some gear myself, and I've heard about those chemtrails. You got to be worried about air quality. He had his own like. I'm like, this guy seems out there. And, but eventually, I mentioned, I'm just, he asked, at one point he asked specifically why I was wearing it. I said, just taking precautions. I didn't really want to get into the details that much. How little could I say as possible? That's basically what I was trying to do. But eventually I did say, COVID's still spreading around, and, this, bird flu, you never know what could happen. And eventually, the conversation kind of, ran its course. He kind of patted me on the shoulder and said, "All right, man, have a good one." That was it. And the encounter with the Secret Service officer by the White House, I'm walking up this. I just walked across town to get the vaccine. This is before I would take the metro in it. So everywhere in DC I would go, I would just walk on the street, and it was like 3 miles away. And there was this one pharmacy I like going to, but it's all the way across town in Capitol Hill. So I walked there. And but on the way home, there's crowds on the street, on the, I guess, 15th Street, by the Treasury Building, not in the White House grounds or anything, but just near it. And there's, Secret Service officers. And as I'm walking up this one, as I pass a couple of them, one follows me from behind and just kind of stops me. And, a big guy with sunglasses and a mustache, the kind of guy that looks kind of intimidating, Secret Service guy, wearing kind of military almost style gear, big guy. And he asked me, what is that? And I said, it's a PAPR. And I'm like, this guy does not know what that is. He's like, what does it do? He asked. And I said, it cleans the air. Again, I'm trying to say as little as possible. How can I make this quick, go quickly? And he's like, why are you wearing it? And I said, air pollution. My mind instantly went through the Rolodex of things I could say that were not COVID, because I know this guy does not look particularly COVID cautious or COVID conscious. I don't want to, stereotype him, but we had just had the wildfire smoke. So I thought, oh, this is something I could say that everybody kind of is, on guard about. So I said that, and he's like, but then, he got down to business and he asked, are you carrying a weapon? And I said, no. And once I said that, it kind of loosened up a little bit. And he said, well, do you wear this all the time? And I said, yeah. And then he kind of like took it in for a moment. He kind of leaned back and he said, all right, cleans the air. And
right.
he kind of let me go my merry way. And, it's kind of funny, he kind of had that moment of like, all right, this guy's okay. And that was it. So both encounters, they wanted to know what was going on here, but eventually it was like, all right, this guy's wearing this.
People, when they ask me what is that, the first thing I say is I just say it's my personal air filter. That's what I tell them.
Yeah, that's smart.
It's my personal air filter, So, and I hadn't had any really pushback on having a personal air filter on. The really cool thing about PAPRs that I like to point out is that they don't require other people to do anything. They're all on us. The onus is on us. Like you were saying earlier about how like it's your own personal infrastructure. I'm not asking other people to put a mask on their face. I'm not asking other people to take precautions. It's all on me and my ability to protect myself or my family's ability to protect themselves. And I get a lot less pushback than that. Even, even trying to think about, interfacing with things professionally or whatever, try asking a group of doctors to show up with mask on, which I've done, and it goes okay. But if I want to go to a group of doctors that doesn't normally wear a mask and I want to wear a PAPR, they don't care, you know. But if I ask them to put the mask on, then sometimes I get a grumbly, right? And so that's one of the beautiful things about PAPR is that it's completely personal. It's completely about something that you're doing. It's not something that you're asking other people to really do. All right, I have a clean space. How important is it to have the eye protection given current variants? Is there any risk analysis to determine when to use the full face mask versus the half mask? So this is going to vary according to your own, again, personal risk tolerance. There was about a 17% reduction in your probability of catching something if you had regular eyeglasses on, not sealed goggles. The studies that I know of were with regular eyeglasses, and it gave you about a 17% reduction. We do know that if you get droplets in your eyes, then transmission can happen that way. But if you're just walking around in common aerosols, it would be highly unlikely that you would get eye transmission from, the smaller aerosol particles. So my family personally uses regular eyeglasses or just regular. Sometimes we use we don't use anything that's sealed. My kids wear glasses anyway. And then I have my screen glasses usually around me almost all the time. And so I tend to sort of keep those on, particularly if there's a, if I'm going to be in somewhere that's pretty crowded in public. Now, I would say that the maybe some examples of when you might really want to have eye protection is again at the dentist if you're going in and there's going to be a lot of splattering or people doing some sort of close dermatological procedure on your face or something like that. If you have the potential for droplet exposure in your eyes, then you would definitely want to do that. And we used to go in full, full goggled out. But over time, as we read and learned, it seems like that you're probably okay. And then the Lumify eye drops also have some pretty good data on, giving you, I want to say it's about 8 hours of good, extra layer of eye protection as well. So we use the Lumify eye drops and just regular glasses. I don't know, Sean, well, you're wearing the full face PAPR now, so no need for goggles under a full face PAPR, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have to remove your clean space mask at airport security? That varies. If you join our group PAPR party, I think most people are there. I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen real quick. Still COVIDing PAPR party. We talk a lot about everything PAPR in this Facebook group of almost 500 of us here. Exploring or utilizing PAPRs. There are people who have been able in this group who have been able to keep their clean space on all the way through. They took some pretty specific steps. They like got the extra, I forget what it is. I haven't done air travel yet, but they got the extra pass, like the extra, whatever that's called, clear pass or something. And then they bought some special lounge privilege, but they were able to go from gate to gate with their clean space on. Other people have been asked to remove their clean space, and they've had a mask in there. I think how clear the clean space masks are also vary. And so if you're buying a clean space, if you ask them to send you the cleanest mask possible, we have my two kids that wear them. One of them has an almost clear mask, and the other one the mask is a little bit milkier. So I think it depends on who's in charge when they are checking your IDs, and then it depends on what of these extra steps you've taken, which are like they're lined out in the group. Whether or not now you cannot wear a helmet like a Draeger or a VersaFlow on flights because of the lithium battery. The clean space lithium battery actually meets FAA criteria, but the big lithium batteries that you have to use for the VersaFlows or the other PAPRs, they're what's not allowed. It's not like that you can't, it's not that PAPRs aren't allowed, it's that to carry those honker lithium batteries on is not allowed anymore. All right, let's see. where are you getting the VersaFlow for 4 to 500? I've been seeing them for 1300. Blizzard is a reseller. They bought a big military lot, and they've been selling them for the past year for 4 to 500 on Amazon. And if you join the PAPR group, there are the links there too. How do you sanitize PAPRs after being in an ER? Think of drug-resistant bacteria. Sean, do you sanitize your PAPR?
I do clean the face mask every once in a while, because when I'm out and I'm social in it, so I'll talk. And of course, when you talk, spittle comes out and whatnot. So I'll wipe down the inside of the face mask. But that's pretty much it. And I change the filter, every once in a while. But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, pretty much the same here. I definitely have to clean sometimes I need a windshield wiper on the front, depending on what's going on. But that's pretty much the same too. I don't completely sanitize the PAPR after being in an ER because I'm not gonna, I mean, I wipe stuff down with BK wipes sometimes, but like fomite transmission for COVID isn't really a major concern. Now, with monkeypox and bird flu, we definitely will be more concerned with that. But we're always washing our hands just in general if we're in any kind of medical situation. And hopefully, we're not like licking the exterior of the PAPR or doing anything else like that with the exterior. So, everything that comes into the PAPR is coming in through that filter. So that your inside should be, relatively clean, and it would just be the outside if you needed to do wipe down. I'll get you guys a back handspring video. I will. I'll put it up in the PAPR group. And I can get a link to the microphone too. When she sings with the mic, does she get hiss or airflow noise from the PAPR? She does not. The Bluetooth mic, because it's on her face and keyed into, I guess, her vibrations, she does not pick up the ambient noise. That was one of the big concerns that we had. I will get you the link for the AYR saline gel. Stoggles do not seal, but they have just some little wings for safety protection. Can people hear you well in a clean space? Clean spaces are louder than VersaFlows. I don't know about Draegers. Have you ever tried a clean space, Sean?
No.
No, okay. My VersaFlow, I don't have any problems communicating with anybody, and I'd imagine your Draeger, you've said you don't either. The clean spaces are a little bit louder, both for you and for people talking to you. I'm pretty loud, so I don't have much of a problem with them, but my oldest daughter sometimes does complain that she has to like sort of yell or speak up in the clean space. I've had problems with clean space PAPRs, breath responsive, cut off when I'm sitting breathing normally because it thinks I'm not wearing it. The filter alarm goes off for no apparent reason. I don't feel safe using them. Okay. They sent you a refund because of the problems. All right. Do the Max Air Capper and 3M VersaFlow have an on-off switch so I can control whether or not it shuts off? And they will have airflow of at least 6 CFM because they're loose fitting. So should I be concerned about marginal and bad fit readings on the clean space pad? That's a lot of questions all at once. I would say that the clean space PAPRs, again, you don't have to have a complete fit. I'm sort of in between size in the mask, and again, that positive pressure is still going to protect you. And the people who've I've talked to who had their clean space sort of shut off while they're sitting there, one big inspiration has been able to turn it back on unless they got one of the faulty units that needed to be reprogrammed. So if they sent you a refund, then that might be because there was a certain batch of the pros. The Halos don't have the problem. There was a certain batch of the pros that were manufactured during a 2-month period that needed a firmware adjustment, I believe. I think that was all the questions as much there. How do you manage road tripping while COVIDing? Bathroom stops are the biggest issue for me. How do you manage it? Sean, have you road tripped yet?
I haven't really road tripped yet, so I don't know.
So bathroom stops, I have this, it's called a sombrero tent. Okay. And it's $20 on Amazon. And it's like you're supposed to use it like for when you're camping, for changing or whatever. And we've had various versions of little porta potties. And but with that sombrero tent, you just put it on like a hat and then it drops down over your body. And the easiest thing is probably a 5-gallon bucket with the potty seat and kitty litter in it if you want to use that. But they actually make little folding ones that on other sites that you can carry with you, or they also have camping toilets that some people use. So some of my friends who drive around use the 5-gallon bucket. Some of my friends use the camping toilets. And then of course, if you're a guy, you can just use the ground, right? You don't even have to have the tent. So we do have usually in the back of my car, we have our sombrero little tent thing, and we have a little we actually have a little folding one that we use most of the time. And you put a little kitty litter in the bottom of it, and then you just tie it up and throw it away, just like you would your kitty litter, and it makes a great portable potty. So that's the bathroom situation that we use for road tripping. When we do road trips too, we stay in Airbnbs. We don't stay in hotels or motels or anything like that. We arrange it ahead of time. And we have a whole little routine we go through where we get to the Airbnb. We're still, masked up. We're opening all the windows. We throw our air filters in there. We wait a specific amount of time. We take our far UV wand. We wand through the place, and then we take all of our stuff off after time has passed. So that's sort of how we handle road tripping. And then having the PAPR makes it a lot easier, because if you need to run into the gas station or you need to, stop and get something with your PAPR on, you don't have to worry about it. Before, it was always a worry that what if we needed X, Y, or Z and we couldn't access it. But with the PAPR now, we're like, okay, I need to run into the gas station and get the can of Fix-A-Flat. That's not a big deal. I have my PAPR with me. We also have a little Jackery unit we carry around that we can plug our PAPRs into and charge them while we're on the road. It also can run our Plus Life for any kind of testing that we need, and it charges our kids' phones. It's just a little portable power bank that we carry with us too. How do the VersaFlows compare to the clean spaces as far as noise? The VersaFlows are much quieter. The only animosity was at my PCP's office. Okay. What's the most comfortable? I think that depends. Again, that's a personal call. I like the VersaFlow versus the clean space. Sean, I think you said your Drager's pretty comfortable. I think you were doing some hiking with it at one point. You were telling me how easy it was to climb those rocks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Last year I did some hiking on some trails and probably going some places. When I got up on this trail last year, there was a fork in the road kind of thing. And there was a moderate trail and a strenuous trail. And I took the strenuous one in my PAPR, which I'm not sure if it's well advised or not, and I'm climbing up these boulders in my PAPR. Like, what am I doing? But it worked out really well, it's I think I mentioned in the talk last year, I saw this video from Drager when I was looking at these, and they have a video with a guy doing parkour, kind of doing somersaults in an industrial park, crashing down on the unit and everything, and just they definitely emphasize in their advertising materials, like, we make this to be, really solid, robust, and able to handle anything. And so I've kind of like taken them at their word a little bit. And, really, like I said, I've done some trails in it, and I pretty much go everywhere in it. And yeah, I mean, I don't like to like run in it, but I will mention that I do physical therapy in it. And that's been a huge thing for me, because I've been kind of putting off medical care for years. And one thing I put off is physical therapy, because I thought, well, how am I going to go in that room with, 20 people in there huffing and puffing? But I've actually gone to 20 sessions this year, and like, it's been great. And I go in, and just to show you what you can do in this. I mean, I've got an elbow issue, so I'm like, I start with the hand pedaling thing. I get in there and I'm doing the pedaling. And this last time we're doing some kind of like dynamic, exercises, and the PT is kind of like 10 feet to my right, and she's like throwing me this medicine ball, and I'm catching, and I'm catching it in the PAPR, and I'm throwing it back, and I'm throwing a baseball against a trampoline. So just to show you, like, you can do a lot in it. And I haven't asked her, but I wonder if she's a little surprised at how it's really gotten to the point where where I'm doing full physical therapy in a PAPR, and we've managed to work around um, absolutely everything pretty much in terms of like, I mean, I've even been able to like lie on my stomach on the table, lie on my back on the table while by rotating the PAPR onto my stomach and kind
Okay.
of rotating the hose to the side. Doing exercises where I need to stand against the wall, I rotated the PAPR to the front. Doing things where I'm, got my hands up here, got my hands behind my back, doing a, pulling on a bar, kind of thing. Just, doing all kinds of like different exercises. It's just, you really can do anything in it.
Yeah.
Is kind of, except go on an airplane. They won't, they won't let you go. But yeah, it's come to think that is one of the interesting surprises over the past year or so, is that once you decide, like we decided over the past year or two, that this is the new normal and we're gonna try to get out and about as much as we can, you kind of adjust. When you get into that moment, you're like, okay, can I do this exercise in PT with the PAPR? I'm like, well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll work with it, and it's really it's pretty adjustable. So yeah, it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah. My son, when in November, when we had to get medical care for him, he had to have a lumbar puncture, and he was able to do that in his clean space with the pillows, just positioning his, neck properly while they went to do the lumbar puncture for him. So I mean, you can't put one in an MRI machine. But like you said, there's just not, I mean, I was able to have a chest CT in one though. So, and mammogram in one, no problem. So there's not a whole lot that you can't do in your PAPR. I did almost grab a world picture, but the airplane thing for the front of for the first part of the where can you go in a PAPR for my little graphic, I was going to put a world map, and then I said no because you can't fly in them. That's the you can't get on the plane with them very easily. But other than that, I would pretty much agree. All
It's
right, has go ahead.
I'll just say I want to share some thoughts about that. I mean, this is kind of just something I've been looking into recently. It is, it's been kind of exciting to think about travel right now, because that's kind of my next venture that I'm kind of thinking about. The last time I really did some travel was in, you know, summer 2021, the so-called summer of freedom. When vaccines had 90 to 95% effectiveness, I felt safe enough to take the train to Philadelphia, I believe it was, or a bus or train to Philadelphia, and then take the New Jersey transit bus to the beach at Wildwood, which I did that summer in my N95 at that time. I hadn't yet graduated to elastomerics or PAPRs. But since that time, I was shied away from travel because it became, during the Delta wave and Omicron wave, it became so much more transmissible. But recently, I have been thinking about traveling a bit, and the fact that I can't travel on an airplane has kind of forced me to get a little creative. So I've kind of really spent a lot of time, and become really interested in, okay, what are the Amtrak timetables of where I can go in one day, in 2 days, and bus schedules and what buses go to different cities. And I've kind of had some epiphanies, like, wow, like there is actually a bus. I just learned this like 2 weeks ago. There's a bus that goes from Silver Spring, Maryland, which is a DC suburb, to Cleveland in a single day. I can get to Cleveland on a bus. If I leave at like 7 a.m., I can get there by 5:30 p.m. And I'm like, that's incredible to me. For someone who's like a mass transit person like me, usually it says like 39 hours to get on
Right.
Google Maps or something. And usually, you feel like most people are like, well, I'm taking a flight. I can't go to Cleveland on the bus. That's never, you can't. Most people think like beyond 3 hours, that's a flight. But what I'm learning is, you know, we can't, I can't fly in this, but I'm learning that there are a lot of possibilities if you just look into it, and there are a lot of options available if you're willing to do some slow travel. So that's kind of what
Well,
I've
and
been.
we drove to Colorado from Delaware.
There you
So
go.
we did. We just drove. Actually, we actually didn't. We rented a minivan because we needed more space, and rented a minivan and drove from there to here. We've actually been looking at boats too. I'm like, I'd like to go to Europe, but I can't fly. Can I take a boat?
Have you looked at they have those liners that cross the ocean. I forget the name of it, but yeah. Have you found anything interesting there?
I haven't actually dug into it yet just because so much time off work. Like I can afford that, but I'm interested now that, like you said, that's sort of my next thing is like how can we get maybe internationally, whether it's we take a clean space and can go, but see, I have a kid that's too small for a clean space too, so that won't work for us. So how can we safely get, from one place to another? And I'm almost to the point where a 3M P100 elastomeric on a plane doesn't scare me that much, but the whole eating and drinking thing, if you're going on a really long flight internationally, would still be an issue. So I don't know. I'm looking into it too. We'll compare notes as we figure out the the travel plans. All right. Has anyone gotten COVID while using a PAPR? I was told there's no studies comparing N95s, etc. I just want to say something about that. The reason why there's not really studies comparing PAPRs to N95s is because it's aerodynamics. It's like science principles. It's not really something that anyone would ever study because people who understand how PAPRs work, which was not me, like I said in the beginning, would it wouldn't really occur to them that they would have to compare it to an N95 because they're completely different things. I remember at one point someone tried to in this was very early on. Someone made the assertion that you could do a strep culture in 45 minutes in one of the groups, not one of my groups. And I came in and said, you can't do a strep culture in 45 minutes. It's actually literally impossible because you have to have the 24 to 48 hours to give the cells enough time to divide to be able to detect them on the plate. But there's no references for that. You can't like say, oh, this study says you can't do a strep culture in 45 minutes because it's just common knowledge. It would be like, I don't know. I have a trouble drawing analogies, but it would be like you have to, you have to do a reference for I don't mean I guess you could do a reference for what water's made of, but it's just sort of basic knowledge. And so I don't really expect there to be like studies comparing PAPRs to N95s because that's what all the standards are about. Like all of this NIOSH stuff and all of these APFs and all of that. Like no one needs to do those kinds of studies because they've set all of the standards based on filtration and efficacy and all of that. That's all already built in. It's baked in there, in my opinion. So I would not expect someone to do a study comparing how many people catch COVID in an N95 versus how many people catch COVID in a PAPR. That would not be something personally that I would expect.
Yeah, I just want to add, yeah, I totally agree. And these devices are incredibly well tested. That's the thing that, with NIOSH, with OSHA, with these regulations, they're very well tested. And the reason for that is that, these weren't designed for, COVID protection per se. I mean, they were designed for medical care uses. But the thing I think about oftentimes is that these are really designed to withstand like toxic chemical environments in industrial workplaces. And that's the way that when I think about how protective this is, I think about that like those workers like really, really can't get any exposure to these like toxic chemicals they're working with in industrial chemical plants. Like that would be a disaster if they got any exposure at all. So when I think about that and how well and that these devices are made and engineered and specifically tested for those workers, the way I look at it is as are elastomerics as well, and N95 have uses in in the construction field and industrial settings as well. All these devices have to meet those standards where it's so important. It's like absolutely critical that that they meet the standards, and they do so not just for a moment of testing, but all throughout the day. That's something that I emphasize. I think I mentioned in my talk, but it's basically that, and I think that goes into one of the aspects of the APF rating, which is these devices are not designed specifically and tested specifically for can an industrial worker wear this for an 8-hour shift or a 10-hour shift and have lasting protection over that entire period. So not only is it engineered tested to be really, really rigorous in the moment, but also over a long period. So yeah, for those reasons, and the fact that, like I said, when I called Draeger, they instantly asked, "What company are you with?" They don't think a civilian, just a guy, random person would be using one of these who doesn't work at an industrial plant or a medical care, facility of some kind. would be using it. And the fact that I hear that every time is like, and the fact that the people I talk to there seem really, really, they'll usually direct me to an engineer, their head engineer or something. And I'm like, these people really know what they're doing, so I have, I have a good degree of, trust in the devices based on all that experience with them.
Me too. Sleeping in a PAPR could be a concern if it was to go off without an alarm. Well, let's just stop right there. I've never had a PAPR turn off without an alarm. Like if the battery's going out, they all start doing this really
Yeah.
obnoxious beeping, beep, beep, beep. And I think you have 120 seconds to flip your battery before it goes. And then the same thing, even like if there's an issue with the blower or whatever, it makes a very loud, obnoxious noise. I have slept in PAPR before for probably 4 or 5 hours. Didn't really have any problems with that. And so I would definitely expect there to be an alarm. If I were concerned that I was going to sleep in a PAPR and I was worried that it might turn off, then I would just put an N95 under my PAPR. So in case it accidentally turned off, then I had an N95 on as a backup. If you have
Yeah.
thick, go ahead,
And with my,
Sean.
oh, thanks. With my Draeger, I think there's even like even before it gets to the phase where it's like about to completely lose, power. There's like a warning beep when it gets to the first bar, which I think is probably has like at least an hour left. And it just gives a little beep, or beep beep, like it's kind of like giving you like gradations of like the warning, before it gets to the high level. So it would be you get a warning, and that's the thing. That's I think I mentioned that in my talk. Like that's part of these devices is that they're so designed with that in mind to really make sure that you're protected. And so it's going to give you quite a bit of warning, I think, before that could even happen.
I agree. If you have thick hair, it seems to block airflow. Crew credit, or can you trust that airflow feels blocked VersaFlow? Your thick hair, I have plenty of thick hair, does not block the VersaFlow. There's a helmet piece in there that lifts the hood off your head, and then the air pressure also makes it like a balloon, and the hole's big enough and from the back, into that hair headpiece. Thick hair does not block the airflow. Do they make any with a window in front that can open to eat that candy bar and close back up? Not that I know of. I don't know any with a window. Do you, Sean?
No.
All right. Can you address subjective? I know it's okay. Comfort versus the comfort level with an Aura 195. Honestly, my VersaFlow is more comfortable in a lot of instances than having an N95 on. I mean, for me, because it's off my face and, there's nothing obstructing anything. Plus, I can, eat or drink. And so for me, a lot of times, even if I didn't have to, I would grab the VersaFlow. I would say the exception for me is, if I'm outdoors and I want to like, play softball or something, still running with it with me. It's easier to run in my Flex and my N90. I mean my N95, but I find it pretty comfortable. How do you clean the PAPR fomites? We've already talked about that. We've already talked about our being in the ER. Could you do? Sean mentioned doing physical therapy. Could one jog in it and do a cardiac stress test? Absolutely could do a cardiac stress test.
I I will mention that with my device, it has a belt. It's fixed via a belt, and when I if I jump up and down, or if I would run it, I think it would it would jolt up and down quite a bit, and so for that reason I probably wouldn't run in it. But I can walk really fast in it. But for stress, I I guess again this might come down to if I was in the moment, could I adjust to make it happen and make it work? If I tighten the belt a lot more than I normally do, I wonder if that might, fix it to my body tight enough such that I could run without it.
How you could do the stress test is it's on a treadmill. So you can
Oh,
take it off. You can hang the
oh,
belt from the
okay.
treadmill and just because like I've done that before, like for the CT. I hung the belt up on the IV pole and then just slayed and had so you don't even have to have your blower unit on you. So you can get on a treadmill and run with it by hanging it on the treadmill. And then just having the helmet. You could totally do a stress test in it.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Is microclimate a trusted PAPR, or do we expect it to be when the 3 is released? I think they're actually going for NIOSH approval. So I would say yes. That's why it's taken them so long, because they're trying to get NIOSH approval. To be more specific with my APF question. Okay, the Max Air Capper has an APF of 25. Higher than an N95, but not super high like some of the other PAPRs. Would you still trust the Max Air Capper like you do with the APFs over 1,000? I personally would. I don't know about you, Sean.
Well, I think as I mentioned in the talk, that the assumed 25 APF for the PAPR is just what OSHA gives it. But if you call the company and ask them what their engineering department tested it at, you might get a different result. In other words, much higher. So I would call the company to ask what their tested APF is for the device.
That's great observation. Do you feel safe enough to go out with PAPRs during big surges like right now or in the winter, or do you wait until the numbers are relatively low? Yeah,
that's a great question. And you know, when you see the wastewater data that comes in mid-December, it gives you pause, doing it just goes up so high, and in last year, for example, I thought about family holiday events, and I haven't done any up to this point. I didn't last year, and I was still up to that point of like the winter wave still gave me pause, just because I know that like it's always the worst every year and it just goes up so high. And I thought, I think I'm gonna chill out a little bit and not venture out that far. But now I think this year, given how much I ventured out into different areas and done so many different things, and gone on the metro, gone to a crowded physical therapy clinic, I can certainly go to my family's holiday in the PAPR. So this year I think I will do it, and I'm kind of planning on doing it. Making my reemergence.
well, and the cool thing is about your PAPR again is it doesn't really depend on what's happening around you, right? Just like it doesn't require other people to mask, it doesn't care if the wastewater is through the roof or not. It doesn't care if you're sitting right next to someone with COVID breathing on you. I mean, you are in a self-contained, system. So, I mean, I would maybe say, tell my kid, let's not do the mosh pit but even then, like,
I will mention one thing that I don't think we talked about or touched on yet is that, of course, the huge benefit of the PAPR and all high quality air filtration with regard to COVID is that by far the most likely way when it's going to be affected is through aerosols, is through the air. But that doesn't completely rule out protecting yourself from fomites, from other ways via touch and via COVID getting on your body, and that sort of thing. So if I'm in an environment where it's particularly crowded or particularly higher risk, for example, right now in DC and rest of the country as well, we're in quite a big wave right now. And if I come back from something and I'm like, I was really close to a lot of people. For example, I went to the zoo today, and it is outdoors, but the National Zoo, and but it was outdoors, of course, but there are some parts where it was really, really crowded, because you're walking through some like tiny walkway where a lot of people are standing around looking at some animal at some different part. And I actually walked through an outdoor festival in DC today as well. And when you're on the sidewalk and you're just walking through a huge throng of people, I've seen those videos where they kind of dramatize like what it's like when COVID particles kind of are expelled from someone's mouth and they land where they land. Some land on people's clothing, some go in the most goes in the air. But I thought sometimes I think to myself, just to be on the safe side, let me just take off my clothes, get a shower, because I really have been in the thick of it. So I'll just mention that the fomite aspect is something I still do take precautions on, and I'm not to say everyone has to do that, but that's just something I do, even while wearing the PAPR, because the PAPR of course doesn't protect from that aspect, and given the fact that if I'm around people who are talking to me, I use the short hood. Some people use the long hood that goes all the way down in your chest. But I use the short hood. I like it, and it's just as protective in terms of the APF rating as the others. But it does leave your neck area and the area around your ears unprotected. So if I'm around people and they're right next to them and they're talking, right next to me, and they have COVID, that means COVID particles could have gotten on my skin all around my facial area. This part would be protected, but all around here it could have, gotten on me. So that's kind of why I still do think about that. But I don't, do that all the time. But if I'm in a particularly, crowded place, I might.
Well, and I would say that, I mean, for me, I'm not particularly worried about fomite transmission with COVID anymore, but I'm definitely worried about it with H5N1 and norovirus and, all of the other kinds of transmission like monkeypox, like everything that is real super touch transmitted too. So, I mean, anytime we're in a crowded environment, COVID or not, it's probably pretty good practice, to keep up that kind of hygiene, to wash your hands, and then if we've been in something that's, really touch intensive, to change your clothes or have a shower. I mean, I think that that can be common sense also for more things even beyond COVID, especially as we walk through the, possibility of multi-pandemics. Have you ever had to swap out the battery with a second battery while wearing the VersaFlow, like for a stay in a hospital for longer than 12 hours? I actually had to swap my battery the first time at that conference that I showed you. Like I said, I was at the conference from 7 in the morning until it was probably like 9 in the evening. So the last few hours, I was actually sitting in the lobby of the hotel, and my warning beeps went off. And I had my other battery ready to go. So I actually was just able to pop out a side door outside, and then flip my battery out and then come back in. But that's the only time that I've ever run into the 12-hour over, except for I will say that I do wear it at work. Work's a little bit different for me though, because I have my own closed office with, I think I have 18 air exchanges per hour in my office, and I have UV, and I have a back door. So I have run it out in my at the end of the day in my office, but usually it's just me by myself. There's nobody else in there with all those other mitigations, and I just go out the back door and I'm fine. You just got your extra battery, Sean. Have you run it out yet?
I haven't tried it yet. Nope, haven't tried it. I'm looking forward to it. Potentially this fall. Now that it's cooling off, the weather's getting nicer, and I'm thinking about taking one of these day trips, maybe to Pittsburgh, New York, Philadelphia. That my big exciting trip is visiting a friend of mine who lives in New York City, and I can get there on the Xcella in like 3 hours. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, is go there and meet him maybe by like 11 a.m. Still have the PAPR on the whole time, and then maybe switch out the battery at like 2 or 3 p.m. and then come home on the train at night. So
I'm just going to pick a few more of these because we're about 30 minutes over. We're at 6 o'clock. But can you ride a bike in a PAPR? You can. Driving a car as a driver, you can. I've driven in my PAPR before. Sitting in the car as the passenger, that's easy. Safe to sleep. Let's see. Any other questions? Don't require people with facial hair to be shaven. You mentioned that. Can a young child go on amusement park rides in a PAPR? They absolutely can. And you can see that in our PAPR party Facebook, people posting the pictures of their kids on amusement park rides in their PAPRs. Let's see. I've had the battery pop off. I've never had the battery pop off before. That's interesting. And then the blower, yes, we have mesh backpacks. My kids wear them in mesh backpacks. Trying to see if there's any other questions. Is your family okay with you wearing a PAPR? My family's just happy to see me. Could you get a colonoscopy in a PAPR? That's going to be up to your physician. I know that there is one person, I believe, that was able to do that. You can find the story in PAPR Party. I know other people have been denied. So that's going to depend on what your physician is willing to allow. All right. Do you do all the recommended pressure testing every time you wear the PAPR? I do not. What about you, Sean?
No, I don't. I'm not sure what that refers to in terms of air pressure testing.
I think that you're supposed to take for the VersaFlow, it's a little gauge thing, the little ball that tells you
Oh,
that you've got, the proper pressure. So I don't know if you're supposed to do it every time, but every so often you're supposed to take that and make sure. But I mean, I'll just say it's blaringly obvious whether or not you're inflated, you know?
I mean, yeah, I'll just mention that sometimes, like, I can either look back at, especially if I'm in a loud environment, and I can't hear anymore that the fan is whirring, but I just want to double check. Okay, is it still on? Is this thing on? So what I'll do is, I mean, I could turn around the machine and look to make sure that the fan light indicator is on. But sometimes, like you said, I'll just kind of pat my, PAPR on the back and be like, okay, it's puffy. It's still air is still,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you can feel the
I
inflation.
can feel that it still puffs out. Yeah.
How often do you change the filters?
I would say, so that's a great question. I would say it depends on two things. And one is was the filter compromised in some way? And one time sometimes that if I'm out and it starts raining or it's like, drizzling out, and I thought, really I should change it if I get caught out in that. And I really try to, that's one thing I've mentioned about the PAPRs, that I really try to avoid going out in the rain or any sort of drizzle, because the way these are designed, they're not designed for high humidity or to get wet. It has to do with the electrostatic element of the filtration. And so you want to keep it dry. So if I've been in a situation like that, I'll switch it out for a new one. I asked the company about that. I said, what happens if, if this thing is, in the rain? And they basically said, like, well, this thing is protected for water, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think you can actually clean it with water, if I'm not mistaken, or but the problem, the machine, I think is somewhat protected from water, but the problem is the filter. Once you put the filter in, the filter is not, um, particularly resilient to water. So, for that reason, I pop it out. But the funny thing is, when I asked him about the filter, he said, "You're wearing this outside?" Right? They don't understand. Like, I'm just a guy walking around DC, and they're like, "It's not supposed to be used in those conditions, sir." Like, this is made for a lab or an industrial plant. Like, you're not supposed. It has certain criteria that it's been tested at, and he basically kind of gave a non-answer answer, like, we don't test for that, for walking around in the rain. But I thought about it, and I'm like, so, but that is one area where I will. But more generally, I would say kind of what you think about changing a HEPA filter, that kind of frequency. I generally would say maybe every 6 months in that regard. I took it out recently. It had probably been like maybe 4 to 6 months, something around there. And similar to my HEPA filter at home, there was a little bit of dust that collected there, where, particularly near where the fan motor is under the filter. It kind of collected in that one spot where the most inward air pressure is. And so that reason, yeah, it seemed like at that point, yeah, let me switch this out. But I'll also mention that I think that they engineer this such that if there is an airflow problem issue, it will beep. It will, sensors will detect that if there is a substantial airflow problem. So you're pretty well
I
covered
was
with
going
it.
to say the clean spaces actually can tell you how much percentage of their filter life is left and all of that, especially if you have the app. So, but I think any of them, if you have filter obstruction, are going to yell at you. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. We really appreciate you guys. And thank you so much, Sean, for coming back and sharing all of your experiences. And we will update you guys again maybe in another year and see where we've been.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to get to speak with you all, and I'm glad to share this information. And thank you for your questions. And give me a moment. I'm gonna go online and add the UV film link to the chat. I'll do that before I close here.